He kicked me with his leg in front of his friends, humiliating me like I was nothing. What he didn't know was that I wasn't just another woman, I was sitting on a $50 billion fortune. He thought he had won with his $10 million contract. But he was about to lose everything. And I was the one who would make sure of it. It had started like any other day. I was sitting across from Jason at our usual spot, the little bistro we liked to go to when he had good news to share. He had just landed the $10 million contract he'd been working for months to secure, and I was happy for him, of course. This was the break he had been waiting for, the moment he'd finally rise to the top of his game. But there was a shift in the air. I could feel it. Jason was different today, not just excited but full of arrogance, swaggering in a way that felt unfamiliar. His phone buzzed with notifications, and his eyes gleamed as he scanned the messages. The phone calls, the congratulations, it was all happening so fast. "Babe, I did it," he said, grinning like he was untouchable. $10 million contract. This is just the beginning. My empire is starting. I smiled, pretending to be just as excited as he was. But as he went on, recounting every detail of the contract and his future plans, I started to feel that nagging sensation deep in my gut. Something about his attitude had changed. It wasn't just about the deal anymore. Jason had always been ambitious, but now it was like he saw himself as better than everyone else. Even me. "You know," Jason said, leaning back in his chair and eyeing me up and down, "I think you should work on yourself a bit. I mean, if we're going to live the life I've been dreaming of, you've got to match my energy." I froze. He hadn't said anything like this before. Sure, we'd had conversations about health and fitness, but this felt like a personal attack. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but my heart was already sinking. "You've gained some weight, babe," he continued, his tone casual. "I just think it's time you lost a few pounds. You know, get in shape, look like you belong with someone who just signed a $10 million deal. You're not exactly keeping up with me lately." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I tried to laugh it off, but I could feel the sting of his words cutting through me. The Jason I had supported, the one I had helped get through his lowest moments, was now looking at me as if I didn't matter unless I fit into some perfect image in his mind. And then, in front of his friends, he did something that would change everything. In that moment, Jason stood up, looked down at me with that smug expression on his face, and without warning, he kicked me. He used his leg to shove me away, right into the side of my body. It wasn't a gentle push, it was a forceful, demeaning shove. His friends laughed, thinking it was all just a joke. But the shock of it hit me harder than anything he'd ever said. My world went quiet. I looked up at him, and there was no remorse in his eyes. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't even looking at me like I mattered. To him, I was just a stepping stone, someone who could easily be discarded when she didn't fit the image he wanted. "You know, maybe we should take a break," he said casually, turning away from me. "I can't have someone who doesn't keep up with me." He didn't even look back as I sat there, humiliated in front of his friends. I could feel the cold stares of the people around us, but none of that mattered. All that mattered was what I had just learned. Jason had no idea what I was capable of. I stumbled out of the restaurant, the weight of his words, the kick, and the public rejection crashing down on me. I pulled out my phone to distract myself, to try to process what had just happened, when a message appeared from my lawyer. I opened it, not sure what I was about to read. The words felt like they were written in another language, surreal, foreign to me. "Ms. Lawson, we are pleased to inform you that the estate has been finalized. Your inheritance is now officially yours. You are the sole beneficiary of a $50 billion fortune." I stood there in disbelief, staring at my phone. $50 billion? How could this be? How could I, a woman who was just humiliated by the man I loved, suddenly be the heir to a fortune of this magnitude? Jason had no clue. No idea. He had just kicked me out, called me worthless, and here I was, the owner of the very wealth he'd always dreamed of. He had no idea that I was the one who held the power now, and everything he'd worked for was about to come crashing down. If you've made it this far, let us know where you're watching from in the comments section. Like, subscribe, and share this video to stay updated on what happens next. You don't want to miss what happens when Jason finds out what's really at stake. The message from my lawyer kept replaying in my mind. $50 billion. It felt like a weight I couldn't comprehend, but it also felt like a way out, away from Jason and his cruel rejection. I thought about everything I could do with this fortune. I could rebuild my life, create something for myself. I could do so much more than stay in a relationship with a man who treated me like I was disposable. But then I thought about Jason. I thought about what he would do when he found out. Would he beg for forgiveness? Would he realize the mistake he had made when he kicked me out? Or would he lash out, desperate to hold on to his fragile ego? I didn't know. But I was going to find out. Just as I was lost in thought, another message appeared on my phone. It wasn't from my lawyer. It wasn't from anyone I knew. The message simply read, "You don't know the full truth yet, but you will soon enough." My heart raced. What did this mean? What was I missing? And why was this message coming now, just as I was beginning to understand what had been taken from me? The message flashed across my phone again. "You don't know the full truth yet, but you will soon enough." My heart raced as I stared at the words, unsure of what to make of them. The message was cryptic, unsettling. Who was sending it? And why now, just when I had discovered the shocking truth about my inheritance? For the next few moments, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. My $50 billion inheritance was supposed to give me the power I needed to reclaim my life after Jason's betrayal. But this new message? It felt like a warning, like there was something bigger I was missing. Something hidden just beneath the surface that I hadn't yet uncovered. I couldn't stay outside in the cold any longer. The restaurant had been a blur, but now, with the message echoing in my head, I needed answers. I walked swiftly to my car, trying to push the dread that was rising inside me to the back of my mind. As I drove home, I thought about Jason and his smug attitude. He thought he had everything figured out. He thought that $10 million would solve all his problems, that his future was secure. He had no idea that the woman he just humiliated was about to bring him down. But was I ready to take that step? Was I ready to turn the tables completely? I pulled into my driveway, still deep in thought. The evening air was crisp, and the night felt heavier than usual. It was as if the weight of my inheritance, my new power, was pressing down on me. I walked inside, locking the door behind me, and sat down in front of my laptop. I needed answers. I knew the first step was to figure out who sent that mysterious message. The number was untraceable, but I wasn't going to give up. I started digging through my legal documents, going through every detail I could find about my inheritance, about the estate that had now been entrusted to me. What I discovered sent a shiver down my spine. The inheritance had not only been set up by my late father, but it had also been heavily guarded. There were layers of protections in place, trusts, offshore accounts, private holdings. It was clear that whoever had been managing this estate had taken every precaution to make sure it stayed hidden. But why? I scrolled through the legal files, desperate for any clue. And then, in a small footnote on one of the last pages, I found it. The name, Lucas Blackwell. Lucas Blackwell. The lawyer who had been overseeing the estate for years. The man my father had trusted above all others. But there was something strange about the way his name appeared. Why had he been keeping such tight control over everything? And why had he sent me the message as if I was missing something important? The next morning, I knew what I had to do. I had to meet Lucas Blackwell, the man who had been hiding the truth from me. If anyone knew the full extent of what was going on, it was him. I arranged a meeting, and within hours, I was sitting across from him in a luxurious office. Lucas was everything you would expect from a high-powered lawyer, impeccably dressed, confident, and guarded. He eyed me with an air of indifference as he set down his coffee. "So, Ms. Lawson," he began, his voice calm and controlled, "I see you've been doing some digging into your inheritance. I assume you're here for answers." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady despite the growing unease. "Yes. I need to understand exactly what this inheritance means. Why was it hidden? Why was I kept in the dark about it for so long?" Lucas leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "The inheritance was never meant to be revealed to you until the time was right. Your father, may he rest in peace, had strong reasons for wanting to keep it hidden. But now that you're the rightful owner, there are certain things you need to know." He paused as if weighing his words carefully. "There are people who would want to use your inheritance for their own gain. Your father foresaw this. That's why he made sure that the estate could only be accessed by you, no one else. But you must understand, there's a certain danger involved." I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "What kind of danger?" Lucas sighed, setting down his coffee. "There are rival factions, both in business and in your personal life, who would stop at nothing to get their hands on your wealth. Jason, for instance, he's just the beginning. But what you don't know is that there's a deeper game being played here. A game that could cost you everything if you're not careful." My head was spinning. The more Lucas spoke, the more I felt like the world I thought I understood was crumbling around me. Jason wasn't just some arrogant boyfriend. He was a pawn in a much larger game, a game that I was now a part of whether I liked it or not. As I left Lucas's office, my mind was in turmoil. Jason had kicked me out, humiliated me in front of his friends, and yet I had never known the full extent of what was happening behind the scenes. I had been too focused on my own anger and hurt to see the bigger picture. But now, everything was starting to make sense. Lucas's warning about the dangers ahead echoed in my mind. Jason wasn't just a man who had made a mistake by rejecting me. He was a part of something far bigger, a scheme that involved powerful people and dangerous alliances. And it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the $50 billion. I was the key to unlocking everything, but also the target for everyone who wanted it. I spent the next few days in a daze. The message from Lucas had changed everything. Jason's kick wasn't just an emotional betrayal, it was a signal. A signal that the people I had trusted weren't who I thought they were. Lucas had warned me. And Jason? He wasn't just a man who couldn't handle my weight, he was a man who saw me as a means to an end. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I had worked too hard for this moment. I had the power to change everything, to turn the tables, to make sure that Jason and everyone else who thought they could use me would learn a hard lesson. I pulled up a map of the city and began to plan my next move. I knew where I had to go next. There were more secrets, more people to confront. The estate wasn't just about money, it was about control. And right now, I was the one in control. Jason thought he could kick me down and walk away, but he had no idea what was coming. The game was changing, and I was about to show him just how quickly the tables could turn. But as I made my way toward the next step, another message pinged on my phone. It was from an unknown number, and it simply read, "You've made a mistake and it will cost you everything." My hand shook as I read it. I wasn't sure who was behind it, but the message was clear. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous things would get. It had been a few days since I received the ominous message from the unknown number. The threat was still fresh in my mind, gnawing at me with every step I took. Who was behind it? And why was I being targeted? Every decision I made now felt like I was playing a dangerous game, with no way to predict what the next move would be. But one thing was certain. The stakes had never been higher. Jason's betrayal, his humiliation, it was nothing compared to what was coming. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my life. The $50 billion inheritance had already shaken my world, but it was just the beginning of something much bigger. Something much more dangerous. I couldn't stay idle anymore. I had to take control. I had to make my move before it was too late. I spent the following days organizing everything. The lawyer's warnings had been clear. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was a weapon. And in the wrong hands, it could destroy me. But now that I knew the full extent of the danger, there was no way I was going to let it slip away from me. The first step was confronting Jason. I knew he was the one who had kicked me out, humiliated me, and discarded me as if I meant nothing. But now that I had the upper hand, I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I arranged a meeting at a quiet cafe, one that he wouldn't suspect. I knew he had no idea that I was sitting on a fortune greater than his dreams. I knew he had no idea that his world was about to come crashing down. When he walked into the cafe, he was his usual cocky self, strutting in with that arrogant grin of his. He wasn't expecting anything. He probably thought I would come begging, hoping for a second chance. But I wasn't there to beg. I didn't even wait for him to sit down before I spoke. "You have no idea who I really am, do you?" I said, staring him down, my voice steady but cold. Jason's eyes widened, and he took a step back, clearly caught off guard by my tone. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion. "You're still upset about what happened? Come on, babe, I thought you understood. I thought you'd get it. You know how hard I've worked for this. I need someone who can keep up with me." I couldn't believe he still had the audacity to speak to me like that. "You kicked me out in front of your friends, Jason. You humiliated me for something as trivial as my weight. But you know what? That was nothing compared to what's coming for you." He frowned. "What do you mean by that?" I took a deep breath, letting the gravity of the moment settle in. "I mean that I'm sitting on $50 billion, an inheritance that your little contract doesn't even begin to touch. And guess what, Jason? You have no idea how deep this goes." The words hung in the air like a bombshell, and for the first time since I met him, Jason looked genuinely shocked. His confident demeanor crumbled, and for a moment, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. But he quickly recovered, trying to mask his panic with a smile. You think this is funny? This is my moment. I've worked for this. You're nothing but a woman who's bitter because I called you out. You don't have what it takes to keep up with me, and you never will. The words stung, but I was done playing the victim. No, Jason. You don't have what it takes to keep up with me. And everything you've built, the empire you think you have, is about to come crashing down because of your own arrogance. He looked at me like I was crazy. You think you can do anything to stop me? You don't even know the game we're playing here. I shook my head, smiling grimly. The game is over, Jason. And you lost. Jason's laughter died as he processed my words. You're bluffing, he said, his voice low and dangerous. What, you think you can just throw your inheritance in my face and I'll back off? I leaned forward, my gaze never leaving his. It's not about money, Jason. It's about power. And you're about to see just how much power I have. The people I've been dealing with, the ones behind this entire thing, they've been using you. You're just a pawn in a much bigger game. Jason's face paled as the pieces began to fall into place. He had no idea what he was involved in, but the truth was staring him in the face. Who are they? He whispered, his arrogance slipping away as fear began to take hold. I stood up, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. You don't need to know. But I'll tell you this, everything you thought you had, everything you've worked for, it's all about to disappear. You made a mistake kicking me to the curb. And now you're going to pay for it. I turned to walk away, but Jason grabbed my arm, his grip tight. Wait, what are you going to do with all that money? You can't just walk away with it. It's mine. I earned it too. I yanked my arm free, glaring at him. It was never yours, Jason. It was never meant for you. It's mine, and you're going to learn the hard way that messing with me was the biggest mistake of your life. As I walked out of the cafe, I knew that everything was set in motion. Jason wasn't the only one who had made a mistake. I had made mine too by trusting him in the first place. But now, with the power of the inheritance and the truth about the people who had been manipulating both of us, I was finally in control. Days passed, and I watched as Jason's world slowly unraveled. The business deals he had lined up collapsed. His reputation took a hit, and people who once supported him began to turn away. I didn't need to lift a finger. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for, crumbled under the weight of his arrogance and betrayal. As for me, I took the inheritance and built something of my own. Something that wasn't just about money, but about reclaiming the power I had always deserved. I didn't need Jason. I didn't need anyone. The empire I had inherited was mine, and now I was the one who called the shots. The message had been clear all along. Jason had kicked me in front of his friends, thinking I was nothing. But in the end, it was I who held the real power. And now the world would know my name. But as I looked out over the city from my penthouse, something gnawed at me. There were still people out there who wanted to take what was mine. And the game was far from over. But one thing was certain. I would be the one to write the final chapter. What are your thoughts on this story? Please leave your comments, like, subscribe, and share this story.